The Trails series is filled to bursting with excellent characters, but we all have our favourites, and this week I want to share with you my top 10 from the series up to this point. There will be spoilers up to Cold Steel 4 here, so be warned. Let's get started with number 10. Starting off my personal list, we have the Zero Artisan and dependable bracer of Erebonia, Toval. Now this may surprise some people, because if I was keeping my rankings confined purely to the games, then I'm sure many would struggle to understand why I think so highly of him. And you wouldn't be remiss in that curiosity, because when I first saw him in Cold Steel 1 and 2, I really did not care that much for him. He was a decent enough character, but he was pretty much designed to be a side member. He never really has a moment to shine for himself outside of sporadic moments within the Cold Steel arc. No, the reason why Toval is so high in my personal ranking is because of the added literature that surrounds him. He has the privilege of being included in 2 extra works both within the games and outside of them. He's one of the main characters from the first collectible novel series in Carnelia, and he's also shown in Ring of Judgment, which canonically is his first appearance in Trails. Those 2 works in particular make Toval a much more intriguing character, mostly because of his ties to Ein Selnut. It makes me wonder why he appears to be the chosen individual of the strongest member of the Grolsritter, and also has me thinking that he might have more to offer as the series progresses, especially if the Church is to become more prominent further down the line. But because of his relatively lukewarm representation in the games themselves, he does get docked some points for that. Nonetheless, still one of my favourites. At number 9, it's the enigmatic yet lovable Tio Plato. She has one of the most gut-wrenching backstories in the series, especially when you consider that she was subject to the experimentation of the DG cult for 3 years. That's not only led to heightened senses, which she is able to amplify further through her Aeon system, but it also effectively locked her humanity away under layers of trauma. This would later lead to her alienating her own parents, and upon leaving Remetheria, there's a chain of events that would lead to her eventual role in the Epstein Foundation. When she finally joins the SSS, it becomes a journey of rediscovery and of challenging the past, which we see through several excellent scenes within the Crossbell arc. And there's no doubt that Tio undergoes fantastic development during that period. However, the reason why Tio ends up lower for me is because her story effectively ends come the climax of Zero no Kiseki. Now that's fine, you can't keep the focus primarily on one member of the SSS, but it's unfortunate when one of the only meaningful scenes that Tio gets in AO is optional. But to follow her story from zero and improve on it further was already a near impossible task, as that game is pretty much Tio central with the plot surrounding that game. Though I wish her story was spread out a bit more, there's no doubt that Tio's development in the series as a whole is one of the best on offer, and she easily makes my top 10. My number 8 spot goes to Toval. Now let's get something straight. She is a ditz. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but she makes up for that through her steely conviction to her beliefs. Toval was a great character up till Cold Steel 4. She had those moments of comic relief along with some decent moments of her own to show what she's capable of. The boss fight in Cold Steel 2 following the events of Keldic comes to mind for me. But as you've probably guessed by my previous statement, it's Cold Steel 4 that elevates her to my higher echelon of characters. One thing you notice very quickly from Toval's first appearance in Cold Steel 2, and to some extent in Ao no Kiseki, is that she is smitten with the Steel Maiden. She lives for her master because of how strongly she believes in Aryan Road's ideals, and with that comes a fierce loyalty. However, in Cold Steel 3, she does begin to question the motive of her master, and by Cold Steel 4 she defects as she feels the current path walked upon by the Stolritter goes against everything they fight for. That in itself requires an inherently strong spirit to go against the person you idolise because you believe they are wrong. But what I love about this is that Toval still shows respect to Aryan Road, and never rules out returning to the Stolritter eventually. But it shows that she is able to stick to her own convictions, even if that means standing against her closest comrades. She's not mindless to the will of her superiors. She may be headstrong and have a bit of a temper, but she earns my respect. Number 7 goes to the Blood and Iron Chancellor himself, Gilead Osborne. Up until this point, Osborne is the longest running antagonist in the series. The effects of his actions have been seen all the way back in Sky's second chapter, and they eventually lead to his swan song in Cold Steel 4. Now, Osborne is going to divide opinions. Some fans would have preferred if he had stayed 100% evil all the way to the end, the seemingly unassailable villain who is able to predict every move on the board before it even happens, while others will like the redemption he gets by the end of the Cold Steel arc. And I'm firmly in the latter category. While I believe it's good to have the purely evil characters like Weissman or Joachim in a series like this, I think that the more integral antagonists like Osborne need more. I know for a fact that I'd be very disappointed if Falcom's answer to Osborne's actions throughout the first half of the series came down to, meh, he's just evil. I need a motive, I need a driving force behind his actions, something that goes beyond the mundane. And I think they delivered that come Erebonia's final entry. It's really compelling to witness Osborne's story that he effectively sacrificed his own happiness to rid the world of an ancient curse, and managed to do so with said curse looming over his shoulder at nearly every moment. To get an idea of how burdensome this really was, look at the final moments of Cold Steel 4 where Ren is effectively taken over completely by Ishmelga within minutes. Osborne held on to that for over a decade, and that speaks to the strength of his character. My only sadness now is that Osborne is gone, and Falcom are going to have to pull out the stops to replicate his influence as we go into the second half of the series. My number 6 spot goes to the Blade Lord and Enforcer number 2 of Oroboros, Louvet. Louvet's story is captivating in terms of how disastrous it is. He's one of the few survivors of Harmel, lost his lover in Karin Astrai, found out that the slaughter of his village was an excuse to start a war, surrendered his little brother-like figure to a sadist in order to mend his shattered psyche, and was laid bare the inherent weakness of humanity by Campanella. Louvet effectively discarded his sense of self in order to test the innate shortcomings within all people, something that he felt could be achieved by bringing the Liberarch back to the world. But despite that torment he suffered and the will to see through his goals, he isn't completely without moral either. He shows on several occasions in-game and in the novel The Tale of Louvet that he despises the methods of Weissman, especially in regards to the Anguis' recruitment of a certain bracer to Oroboros' ranks in Sky's second chapter. It's this sense that Louvet was never completely lost to his darkness, and that's ultimately the reason why his younger brother is able to bring him back during their fight on the Axis Pillar. Overall, I really enjoy Louvet's story and, by extension, his character. I think he has a lot of excellent moments within the Sky arc, and he contributes to the strong character-driven narrative within the first 3 games. Breaking into my top 5 is Alan Richard. I've said many times how much I love this character, and that still stands even after the 10 games I've played. In my opinion, Alan is the pinnacle of redemption within the Trails games, a man who lost all hope, who was manipulated because of the insecurity he felt in safeguarding his homeland from future threats, and someone who now looks to protect Liberl in his own way through the independent research firm he sets up in Rouen. Alan Richard is just a cool character through and through. Despite his vulnerability, which I feel also lends to the overall appeal of his character, he commands respect. He's humble, a strong swordsman in his own right. And even come his pardon by the end of Sky's second chapter, he still feels that his actions will never absolve him of his past deeds. But he doesn't just sit on his laurels and give up, instead he consistently attempts to protect his homeland through his own means. It's not about forgiveness for Alan Richard, it's about the love for his country. I don't really need to say more than that. Yeah, I mean, you were expecting to see the OG protagonist on here somewhere, right? My number 4 spot goes to Estelle Bright. Our pigtail tomboy is pretty much the perfect heroine in my mind. She starts off naive and inexperienced, but by the end of the Sky arc and beyond, she becomes a light of salvation for 2 characters who had seemingly been lost. But the great thing about Estelle is that she earns her credentials through her actions. She's not a gifted martial artist or a chosen one of some ancient land, she's a normal girl who wants to help others by becoming a bracer. That in itself makes Estelle human. I can relate to Estelle's journey and the struggle she faces. And it's because of the stellar development we see throughout her journey that the later scenes within Sky's second chapter especially have emotional weight behind them. Because we have seen the turmoil, we have experienced the hardship. But despite the growth she has, Estelle never truly changes at her core. She's still gung-ho, she's still that personified ray of sunshine even 9 games down the line. That's the great thing for me. Falcom created the foundation for Estelle to blossom into something amazing, and they simply weaved aspects of the narrative around her so that it could come out. This was always a no-brainer for me. Into my personal top 3 now, and the one coming out with the bronze medal is Altina Orion. Altina is somewhat similar to Tio in a way, but for whatever reason I just felt more attached to Altina's development. And no doubt, if this list was based purely off of Cold Steel 2, then Altina would be nowhere near the top. It's the second half of the Cold Steel arc where she truly shines. She starts off as a husk, devoid of anything that makes someone human. She was loaned to the Noble Alliance, she carries out her orders, and that's pretty much it. I think a scene that rams that idea home comes in the early stages of Cold Steel 3, where she can't even comprehend what a choice is. She can't understand this idea of liking something. But during her time with the members of New Class 7 and Ren, she develops superbly. You find that she begins to care for the well-being of those around her, that she was happy to sacrifice herself for them come the end of Cold Steel 3. And yes, I really like the bond she has with Ren in particular, considering all the missions they've had together on and off screen. It makes sense that they appear to have an older brother-sister or father-daughter relationship. But even with all that development, she still maintains that robotic yet endearing humour to her. One of my favourite moments from her is when Elise comes over for a sleepover and leaves, and she gets involved with all the shenanigans that comes with the stereotypical sleepover. She's a brilliant character, a real joy to have journeyed with, and she is one of the main reasons why I think New Class 7 is just all out stronger than the original. At number 2, it's everyone's favourite Wandering Priest and 5th Dominion Kevin Graham. Again, I've said many times how much I love Kevin as a character. I made a full 30-minute story video retelling his journey if that's not evidence enough of how great I think he is. The thing that draws me to Kevin is the polarity of the man, the fact that he can flawlessly act out the role of a carefree priest on the surface, but below that he harbours an insatiable urge to rid the world of heretics, and he can switch that persona at ease. Case in point Weissman aboard the Liberarch. And that all comes to fruition come Sky the Third, where Kevin takes up the role of protagonist. We see the backstory, we see the suffering, we begin to understand that twisted psyche beneath the onion hair, and how he wants to punish himself for his own failings, something made apparent in the world that is created from his stigma's negative energy. It is a fantastic story to witness, as is the moment where he forgives himself for the past, allowing him to push on for the world that Rufina dreamed of. Kevin is just a top tier character, and the only crime is that he hasn't returned yet. Before we jump into number 1, here are a few of my honourable mentions. Olivert Rice Anna. Boisterous, hilarious, and cunning, the reason Class 7 even came to be. Arian Rode, one of the strongest characters in the series and embodies the notion of being a saint. Cassius Bright, the OG badass and dorky father. Risha Mao, a path that was laid out for her upon birth but manages to evolve the persona of Yin through her love of Arkansas. Randy Orlando, playboy extraordinaire, well, tries to be, but harbours a dark secret that took him away from the life of a Jaeger. And finally, Joshua Bright, the other half of a fantastic double act in the Sky arc. Broken by his loss, pushes away another he cherishes to avoid losing them, but eventually accepts the folly of his logic, and uses that to bring back Luve. Anyone who knows me would have seen this one coming from a mile away. my number 1 spot goes to the Angel of Slaughter, Ren Bright. Quite simply, Ren has the darkest backstory of all the characters in Trails. In my mind, there is no doubt about that. Her parents were forced to leave her in the care of an old friend, only to later be abducted into the brothel of paradise. The effects of Gnosis caused her to absorb the personalities of children who perished in said brothel. She attempted to maintain her own sanity through self-mutilation, and eventually was taken in by Oroboros to become an enforcer, where she would also be partnered with her surrogate parent in Patamata. It's a wretched backstory. Now, to get this straight, when I first saw Ren in Sky's 2nd chapter, I hated her. How sadistic she was, how she revelled in the suffering of others. But then, as Falcom so often and brilliantly do, they peel away the layers of malice to reveal a child. And that is what Ren is. She is a scared child, someone who doesn't want to be hurt again. And due to the actions of Joshua and Estelle especially, she's eventually able to come back from the pits of despair, becoming a member of the Bright family by the end of Zero no Kiseki. Ren to this day is still my favourite character in Trails, and I expect her to remain there for the foreseeable future. She has everything that I love from a character arc, and her return in Cold Steel 4 only served to cement her in that top spot. The finest character that Falcom have ever brought to life. And there it is guys, my personal top 10 characters in Trails. I know there are going to be a few people wondering why certain individuals were not on this list, but quite simply the Trails series is loaded with excellent characters, and this is an attempt from me to compile them into 10. There are going to be some notable omissions, but I'm happy with the choices I've made here. Naturally, we'll also have to see if Kuro no Kiseki will be bringing us even more cast members who can effortlessly pull on our heartstrings. Until next time guys, peace.